Good morning. We're very glad to see you here this morning, for those of you who are here in person and for those who are with us online. It was one of the only times that I can remember when our house was filled with extended family. I remember my grandparents from Omaha, Nebraska, Uncle Bob and Aunt Kathy and their children Tim and Andy from Omaha, Nebraska, and an aunt from Council Bluffs, Iowa, all filling our house in Sunspot, New Mexico. And it was sort of a miracle because they lived so far away and our hometown was so remote and tucked away in the mountains of southern New Mexico that we rarely had extended family like this visit. Dinner was over and the adults had moved into the living room. Tim, Andy, Craig and I were playing in our room. And we quickly got bored and I poked my head out the door and saw the adults in the living room, and I thought to myself, it would sure be fun to go and scare one of those adults. And so I got down on my hands and knees and crept silently like a cat toward the nearest adult, my aunt from Council Bluffs, Iowa. And just before I reached her, and just before I was about to make a loud noise to scare her, my grandmother from Omaha caught my eye. She didn't say anything. She ever so slightly shook her head. And she put her finger to her lips. And I knew what she was thinking. Don't you dare make that loud noise. And so I crawled back, sulking, to our room. Psalm 98, today's psalm, is inviting us. It is inviting us to make a loud noise. And that word, loud noise, is the translation of a Hebrew word, ruah. Everybody say ruah. Say it with energy. Ruah. So this psalm is inviting us to ruah, to make a loud noise. But even as we consider the invitation of this psalm, many of us will likely have in our minds memories of people or even institutions who would be telling us, don't you dare make that loud noise. Because after all, sometimes a loud noise is just not appropriate. For example, tennis players can be penalized for making a ruah on the court during a match. One of the most iconic examples of this was a tennis match in 1981 when John McEnroe had a meltdown on the court, saying, "You can't be serious," to chair umpire Edward James. Here's a clip of that.
Look, you can't be serious, man. You cannot be serious! That ball was on the line. Chalk flew up. It was clearly in. How can you possibly call that out? How many you can miss? He's walking over. Everyone knows it's in this whole stadium, and you call it out? Explain that to me, will you?
John McEnroe was letting loose a ruah. But in that case, the chair umpire and others were telling him, don't you dare make that kind of loud noise. Sometimes even a seemingly holy ruah is frowned upon. You may remember the movie Sister Act. Dolores was a lounge singer in Nevada. She witnesses a mob murder. She's placed in protective custody in a church filled with nuns. And while she's there, she decides to try to transform their boring chorus into something with a little more ruah. And as she does, Mother Superior shows her displeasure Here's a clip of that.
Hail, Holy Queen enthroned above, O Maria. Hail, Mother of mercy and of love, O Maria. Triumphal ye cherubim, sing with us, ye seraphim, heaven and earth resound the hymn. Salve, 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 Regina. Hail, Holy Queen enthroned above, O Maria. Hail, Mother of mercy and of love, O Maria. Triumphal ye cherubim.
So as the Rua lets loose, Mother Superior registers her great displeasure. Don't you dare make that loud noise in here. Which brings us then to Psalm 98. Psalm 98 is a psalm of enthronement. It's one of the songs that exists to proclaim that God reigns and to teach us what it means to live as if we really believe that God does reign. Psalm 98 counsels a particular response to the reality of the reign of God. Make a joyful noise to the Lord, all the earth. Break forth into joyous song and sing praises. Sing praises to the Lord with the lyre and the sound of melody, with trumpets and the sound of the horn. Make a joyful noise before the King, the Lord. We note this phrase that's used twice. Make a joyful noise to the Lord, all the earth. Make a joyful noise before the King, the Lord. The Hebrew word here is ruah. Everybody say ruah. Ruah. Say it with energy. Ruah. It's used 42 times in the Hebrew Old Testament. Often it's used throughout the Psalms. It has a wide range of meanings. It just literally means to make a loud noise, either with the voice, a shout, or with some kind of instrument. Ruah can describe what you do when you are victorious in battle. When you win the battle, you ruah. And so you think of the last time that you won the board game, when you were playing with a group of people. Yes! That's a ruah. Ruah is also used as a sound of despair. When you are in pain, you ruah. Think of the last time you accidentally cut your finger cooking or burned your hand or hit your hand with a hammer. Ouch! That's a ruah. I think of the loud groan my father uttered when my stepmother passed. Ruah. The Psalms use this word again and again. Psalm 47, clap your hands, all you people, shout to God with loud songs of joy. Psalm 65, the meadows clothe themselves with flocks, the valleys deck themselves with grain. They shout and sing together for joy. Psalm 66, make a joyful noise to God, all the earth. Psalm 81, sing aloud to God, our strength. Shout for joy to the God of Jacob. Psalm 95, oh, come, let us sing to the Lord. Let us make a joyful noise to the rock of our salvation. Psalm 100, make a joyful noise to the Lord. Psalm 108, Moab is my wash basin. On Edom, I hurl my shoe. Over Philistia, I shout in triumph. Psalm 98 is inviting us to respond to the good news of the reign of God with ruah, with a loud and exuberant exclamation. Psalm 98 is encouraging us to experience the reign of God in the way that we experience so many other aspects of life. For example, Chelsea Football Club has existed since 1905 in the UK. After a recent season was over, at the end of the last game, interviews were being held on the pitch. Cameras were on. Players were talking. Families had brought their kids down there. And as the interviews were being held, the camera caught one small child who had made its way to the field and found a soccer ball and was now kicking that soccer ball toward a goal. And listen to the way the crowd responds when the little child finally kicks it in, the goal.
They not only these ones, but all the other ones that I play with, and they were fantastic.
So now they see this child with the ball, moving towards the goal. Closer. Just about there. Rua! Now, I'll bet that many of the people present at that game that day were facing challenges in their lives, had relationship issues they were struggling with, had financial issues that were stressing them. And even in the midst of those, they were able to experience Rua, this moment of exuberant joy. Johns Hopkins recently had a surprise speaker for their commencement, President Zelensky of Ukraine. And listen to the way that the students present respond as he is introduced and then as he concludes his speech.
Welcome President Zelensky to Johns Hopkins.
Congratulations on reaching this honorable milestone, graduation day, at one of the world's greatest universities.
What the students were doing was Rua. And I'm sure that day there were some students who were anxious about this next season of life. This academic season was over. A new season was beginning. What was it going to be like? Where were they going to be? What were they going to be doing? And yet, even in the midst of that, they experienced this overwhelming exuberance and joy. They Rua. And Psalm 98 is inviting us to Rua in response to the good news that God reigns. Psalm 98 is saying, yes, please go ahead and make that loud noise. Go ahead and trust that because God reigns, it is possible to experience joy in exuberant ways in your life. And as such, the psalm is telling us something very important. Because God reigns, intense joy remains possible even when life sucks. We end the sermon in the way that we began this series, remembering that there are circumstances in our lives that make it feel like God is not enthroned, God is not in charge, God does not rule. And those experiences fill us with despair, fill us with discouragement. And they can make a psalm like Psalm 98 sound jarring and empty. Because of life's hard times, this invitation to joyful noise can sound a little bit like toxic positivity. Toxic positivity is that strange American version of Christianity that minimizes the hard times in life, often ignores the suffering in life, and says life is always good, and therefore you should always be positive. But that is not what Psalm 98 or any of the enthronement psalms are saying. These are psalms that acknowledge the difficulties of life and instead offer what we might call tragic optimism. Tragic optimism is a phrase coined by Viktor Frankl, a psychologist and survivor of the Holocaust. And Frankl said, we cannot ignore the pain and the suffering of circumstances in life. And yet, in those circumstances, it is possible to experience what he called tragic optimism. It is possible to experience real, honest joy. And that's what Psalm 98 is telling us. Psalm 98 is telling us that even in the worst of times, even when we can't lift another finger, there is hope. And that hope is simply this, that God reigns. Even when we can't see it, even when we doubt it, there is someone up there in charge. There is a greater plan at work. There are positive forces of good at work in the world. In the end, in the very end, all will be well. In the end, the very end, all of this somehow is going to work out because God reigns. And because God reigns, we can rua. Even in the midst of hard times, we can experience joy and praise. When we wake up on Monday morning, feeling the heaviness of a week in front of us, we can rua. When we open the mailbox and find an unexpected bill, we can rua. When an interview for a job or a school falls through, we can rua. When we get a diagnosis or a grade that we did not desire, we can rua. Because no matter what, God reigns. And the reality of that reign of God can always lead to a response of rua. And so this sermon is inviting you, no matter your circumstance, to rua. As this service ends, go ahead and rua. As you leave this place later on and find your way to lunch or other conversations, rua. As you begin to plan for the week in front of you, rua. As hard or happy times come upon you this week, rua. Remember throughout each moment of this week that God reigns. And remember that because God reigns, joy is possible. Let's rua.
Come, let us sing of all his marvelous deeds. His right hand has won the war. His holy arm has shown his power. Come, let us sing of all his marvelous deeds. His right hand has won the war. His holy arm has shown his power. The Lord has made known his salvation and revealed his righteousness to the nations. He has remembered his love and faithfulness to the house of Israel, and the ends of the earth have seen the salvation of our victorious God. their hands in the mountains. Sing together for joy before the Lord, for he will come to judge the earth in fairness, and all will see he rules with justice and judges all equally. Of all his marvelous deeds, his right hand has won the war. His holy arm has shown his power. Shout for joy to the Lord. Join the magnificent song. Play a note and let your voice sing as we praise the Lord.